everybody out there in Facebook land. Can you hear me? I'm using a new setup. Things might look a little bit different, but I'm hoping I'm coming out to you in a proper and good looking format now. And hopefully I'm not going to have quite so many meltdowns and things like that. Okay. It was a really, really big week last week when I worked with Amy Grabish to process a chicken at her beautiful, beautiful farm, Grabish Farms out in Dixon, California. I wound up taking that chicken and making a beautiful coco van out of it that was completely out of this world, unlike any coco van I've ever experienced in my life. Using a home processed rooster for this is night and day different from all of the, the processed chickens that I usually get from, your Foster Farms and all of that stuff, right? Even much different than organic chickens that I've gotten before, heritage breeds that I've run into before. This bird was nothing like it. I've already gotten 2 dinners out of it. I've got a 3rd dinner planned. I still have a little bit of that delicious chicken stew left, and I'm still gonna make some stock out of the bones from that chicken as well. And so it just goes to kind of show how you should really be working with a chicken or something along those lines, steak, beef, anything. Treat it with respect. These animals had a life and they had hopes and dreams. And when I buy a chicken, I'm hoping to get 3 or 4 meals out of that if possible. Also, another thing is I'm not looking for those mass-produced commodity chicken parts. I'm buying a whole bird. So I get all of those extra goodies like bones and livers and hearts and things like that, that I can utilize in my quarantine kitchen. So it was just a great, great experience. And this week we are going into a whole new realm. Okay, I want to shift gears. I've been wanting to play with some potatoes. So I'm going to get started with potatoes today. Welcome to my TaterTalk. Okay, that's kind of what we're looking at today. So what I'm going to do is, as always, I'm at the mercy of my ingredients. I've got a few things to get on the fire right out of the gate before I even start talking about things. And so we are going to go ahead and get that going. Okay, the first thing I want to do is actually infuse some cream for my au gratin potato. When I do an au gratin potato, I try to just flavor my cream really, really well, and then I don't have to put expensive things like cheese and things like that in my potato. And you're probably hearing this like, what do you mean there's no cheese in your au gratin potato? And I'll tell you, I haven't put cheese in my au gratin potato for years. Another thing I never use in an au gratin potato are eggs, right? And, it's just a super, super long cooking time. I've seen these recipes with eggs in them that just cook for so long that the proteins all just kind of scramble in the first 20 minutes of cooking, and then by the time the potatoes are done, you're just looking at these like curdled egg proteins in there that have kicked out all this water, and they're very, very grainy on your palate. So eggs have no business in this, in my opinion. Also cheese, I don't really need to get cheese in here to get a good golden brown on top of these potatoes, and so that's kind of what you're going to see here. The ingredients that I use today are much, much more economical than cheese. And I also am using one premium ingredient in this, and that is heavy cream. I went and got some heavy cream, which is not cheap. And since I'm using that heavy cream, I really have always felt I don't need to add cheese. I get the creaminess that I'm looking for in this dish without it. You're going to see it comes out dynamite. I put so much flavor into this very first step where I infuse the cream for my potatoes that I have never needed cheese. And I'll go through this with students time and time again. And at the end of it, the students all agree. It's just like, wow, you were right. It doesn't need cheese. Okay, so that's what you're going to see today. Okay, I need to get this on the fire. This infusion, it's the very first step. We're not even talking about cooking yet. Okay, and so here we go. I got a little heavy cream, and I'm going to put it in a pot. And you can see I've just got a small little pot here, nothing fancy. I do like my pots, by the way. And you probably saw me shake that up, okay? Whenever I'm dealing with heavy cream, I always give that bottle a good shake. I always give it a good smell, make sure everything's okay. Be careful not to touch the nozzle with your nose, the nozzle with your nozzle. And I don't normally do this. Usually I really like to go just straight cream, but I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of milk this time too, okay? I just love that straight cream thing. It's like super, super rich. The milk just kind of soaks into the starches. It does help the waters in the milk kind of soak into the starches, help it kind of bind together. The starch is really the binder here. As I said, we're not really using eggs or things like that. Let's see, I think I'm done in the fridge. Oh, the milk, let me get that milk. I'm gonna stretch this out a little bit because I decided to make a larger casserole than I had originally planned. So that was a pint over there, and I probably just threw in another half cup of milk. I might add a little bit more. In the quarantine kitchen, you know, I'm just kind of eyeballing things, but I'll give you some amounts here in a minute. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw in a bay leaf. I told you I'm going to infuse some flavor into this cream. And these flavors that I'm using today are very familiar if you've watched any of my other shows. This is a French dish, actually. Gratin dauphinois is the name of this, okay? And basically just bay leaf, it's that French flavor profile. A little bit of garlic, okay? The garlic in this one, I'm just going to crush these garlic cloves and throw them in the pot. I could get a little fire under the pot now, but just a little one. And let me go ahead and smash those cloves. There's a 1, and there's 2, right onto my blade and into the pot. Those guys are going to cook down into almost nothing, okay? And if you do run into a garlic clove, that's a treasure. You win the prize, okay? So right now it's just bay leaf and garlic in there. The next thing I'm gonna work in there is some thyme, okay? Again, if you've been watching these videos, I've been doing a lot of French flavor profiles these days. So I've got a big old bunch of thyme there. I'm gonna tie that up with a piece of string so I can pull it all out at the end, but they're really long strands of thyme. My bush out there is just going crazy. But that's okay, I love thyme. Can almost not have too much. And I'm tying that string. Not a fancy knot. Just one that doesn't come apart. And we'll pull all of that thyme out later on. I'm going to get a lot of flavor out of that though. Again, this is like infusing. It's like making a cup of tea. So there's a bunch of thyme in there. You can kind of see that. There's a lot. And that's okay if little bits of thyme break off in this thing. I love seeing those little bits of thyme. In fact, that's my design. I'm going to be doing that, kind of working some of those little leaves into it later. Okay, so I've got garlic, I've got bay leaf, I've got thyme, I've got cream. I'm going to work in a little bit of black pepper. I don't want real big specks of this. And so I'm going to go ahead and do it really, really fine. I'm going to tighten the screw on the bottom of my pepper grinder and just grind that in. It's super fine pepper. And I'll show you about how much. You can still see it on the surface. You can see about how much pepper I worked into this. Now that might seem a lot, but remember, we're going to be adding potato. This is being added to potatoes. Those are big starchy, dense fellows, and they're going to need a lot of seasoning, okay? Speaking of seasoning, the last thing I'm going to throw in here, second to last thing, sorry, I'm going to add a little salt while it was in the neighborhood next to the pepper. And that also, you can see that I added a lot of salt to this, okay? We're going to be using, I'm throwing a couple of pounds of potatoes in mine, right? I need enough salt for a couple pounds. I'll probably throw in more seasoning before this is over, okay? So be aware, lots of salt, okay? Enough for all of those potatoes. And the last thing I'm going to throw in, again, you've seen me use this before in other classes, I'm going to do a little bit of nutmeg, okay? Again, it's that very French housewife flavor profile with this dish. It's a French dish. Again, that name, Gratin dauphinois. A lot of people think that gratin means cheese or something having to do with cheese, perhaps, or something like that. But all gratin means is that it is browned on top. Now, that seems like I worked a lot of nutmeg in, but believe me, lots of potatoes. So let me kind of go through what was in there. I've got about a pint and about a half cup, about 4 extra ounces of milk and cream mixture in there, okay? Mostly cream. I threw in 2 garlic cloves. I smashed them and threw them right in there. I've got a big old bunch of thyme, and I've got some nutmeg. I've got some salt. I've got some pepper, okay? I'm going to have this up on a screen here in a little bit, okay? But for now, I needed to get that on the fire. There's a few extra thyme leaves there. I needed to get that on the fire so it could infuse a little bit and develop some flavor, okay? And while that's going on, we'll kind of talk about the rest of the day. Okay. Now, what I wanted to do today is I'm going to have this item cooking, and I'm going to be making dinner later and everything like that. I'm going to just do a couple of fun things along the way. For instance, my dinner today, I should talk about, okay? I went to a longtime friend of the show, VMillerMeats, yesterday on Sunday, and I asked him for, hey, give me some quick cook items and give me some slow cook items and things like that, right? And so they hooked me up with some various meaty treats, okay? And what I'm going to do is just do off a sirloin steak tonight. When I'm talking about the cuts from VMillerMeats, one of the things I like to talk about is how they have off-market cuts. Because this is a whole beast butcher, they'll just bring in a cow or a cow and a half on a given week, and you get the parts that they have. In most big, processing slaughterhouse plant places, they get all these weird off-market cuts and they just chuck them into the hamburger, right? That goes right into the grind. And so you never see these cuts like, back in the day, flat irons and things like that. It would just stay, it would just like get tossed in the grind, or something, right? Tri-tip was something in much of the country, they would just toss that into the grind, right? That's an example of what used to be an off-market cut, right? So all of these off-market cuts are the cuts that you just never hear about because maybe there's only like 2 of them on the beast, and it's not marketable. There's like a dozen or 16 or so New York steaks on a beast. Now a New York steak is a marketable piece and it's pretty and it looks good, right? These off-market cuts, there might be just 1 or 2 on the beast, like I said, not as marketable. Also, they're probably not as pretty. They're not those photogenic cuts like that New York I just mentioned to you, or that ribeye steak I just mentioned to you. Have you seen a flat iron? It's kind of weird looking. It's just this flat piece of meat that's got this marbling in it that just kind of looks a little different if you've never played with that, right? There are other cuts. I'm using the sirloin today. The sirloin is a great value cut. It's got some nice marbling in it. It's a tender cut. It's kind of comes from what I always call the animal's love handles, that region right there, right? And that particular cut, it's very, very nice, but it's not a pretty cut. There's some bone structure back there and everything that you have to cut around, so you don't get those pretty New Yorks that look good in a steakhouse, right? Your sirloin steaks oftentimes, have weird shapes to them and things like that. But again, it's one of those off-market cuts that's a great value, that tastes great. And if you're looking for value and great taste, you want to kind of look into those. So that's what I'm using today. Now, later this week, I'm hoping, if I may, get to the man himself. I want to get an interview with Mr. Mr. Eric Veldman Miller. Sorry, I know the guy's name. I have known this guy for many, many years. We used to teach together at a school, and he opened up a shop, and I kind of helped those guys get the shop rolling in those early days. It was kind of a blast to be around all of that. And he just made Dane to provide us with his presence on Wednesday, and we're going to kind of talk about some of these off-market cuts with him and what he thinks. Hey, what are some of the better values in that case? What are some of those steaks that really excite him, or whatever? What is going on in the meat world? How they're holding up? How they're doing service during COVID? That's also going to be a part of the conversation, of course, right? Because all of the restaurateurs in the industry are currently trying to reinvent themselves and figure out how to shift gears and serve the people, because that's what we're all about, and that's what they're all about. And it's really, I say it almost every week, how I look out there on social media and see the projects that people are doing, and it makes me feel about 2 inches tall, just kind of hanging back in quarantine here, seeing these guys going out there and feeding people in need and doing anything they can just to reach out. And we're also seeing the suppliers, the produce companies and Produce Express doing their consumer boxes and everything they can think of to try to evolve into this new way of things and how they can still best serve the people and keep that food supply going. Okay, it helps a lot that California has a lot of its own regional food system, and that we have people like Produce Express and people like VMillerMeats that brings non-commodity beef to us, a different alternative that we don't see every day. People like Amy Gravish, who was helping me out the other day, that raises those very animals. So we've been from the ranch to the butcher is next and beyond after this, right? And so I'm very excited to meet with Mr. Eric. You'll see we used to work together, and so we ought to have a little fun, okay? Just a little warning, neither one of us say anything that's very serious. It's going to be a big smile snark fest on that day, I'm expecting, okay? It's going to be good stuff. I am currently waiting for my cream to come up. I'm going to give it just a little bit more heat. It is right there at the line where it's just going to start boiling in the corner there. You guys might be able to see that, okay? Now, I'm going to bring it up just a notch, and I want to get it to a good full boil and start letting those flavors evolve in there, if you will. And see how it's coming up? I'm turning it right back down, pulling it off the heat. Just be real careful. Whoop, almost had a little boil over there. And let me kind of set this up here, and you guys can kind of look down on that. And I'm just going to give it a stir and make sure everything's down in there. I think I will use my favorite wooden spoon ever. And so all of those flavors are now blending together. What I want to do is just get this at a tiny, tiny simmer for about 5 minutes. Like I said, I want to kind of steep it like a cup of tea, okay? So we talked about the rest of my dinner. We talked about what's coming up on Wednesday with Mr. V. Miller. And let's see. Oh, other things with my dinner. I'm going to have the sirloin steak. We're going to have the au gratin potatoes as a quality side. And then I don't have a lot of vegetables in my quarantine kitchen right now. I think tomorrow is going to be a produce run of some kind. And so what I'm going to do is just peppers and onions over my steak today, okay? You'll just see that. I don't really like sauteed bell peppers by themselves, but I do like a roasted bell pepper. So I'm going to roast off my bell pepper. I'm going to saute up my onions and then just throw my bell pepper in there with it. It's just kind of a different flavor profile. I've never really liked sauteed bell peppers. It's just not my cup of tea. So while my cream is steeping, I want to kind of bring up the recipe for this. Let me kind of share a little something with you, and let's kind of show you what we're working on. Hopefully you guys can all see that out there. I've got a recipe going for this, and you are seeing au gratin potatoes, and you are seeing heavy cream in there. About a pint, there it is, a couple of garlic cloves. You guys just saw this, okay? There is some thyme in there, some nutmeg, some fine pepper, okay? All of that you guys just saw. And you also saw, we placed it in a pot and brought it up to a boil, and now we're steeping it, okay? So the next step for this is the potato side of things, okay? I've got a bunch of potatoes that I sliced up already. You don't need to see them all, but I left some unsliced just so you can kind of see what that all looks like. And I'm going to start putting this thing together, okay? You can see in this recipe here, it's about 4 or 5 russet potatoes. Salt, I left that out because I really want to talk about this salt. You need a lot of salt in here again, just because you have that big mass of potato in here. I'm using a lot of potatoes. So I salted this liquid, and I'm also going to salt those potatoes too, okay? Just so it's just really through and through. You'll see the next ingredient, if I can bring it up, I think you guys can see that, is a little bit of butter, okay? I'm just going to use that butter to rub into my pan. You know, it's kind of traditional, and then we build our casserole in there, so you'll see that in a minute. I'm going to slice my russets thin. Leaving the skins on is optional. You know what I did today is I'm going to peel some, and some have the skin on because I like the skin on there personally. I don't like to throw things away, and it's nutrients. If you're leaving the skin on, scrub those potatoes really well, like scrub the daylights out of them. There's bacteria on the outside of these things and soil and things like that, right? So really, really scrub those guys good. And then you're going to just slice them up. As you slice them, one of the big watchwords is super thin. I want to get them as thin as I can get them. And so they really layer together well, right? I don't want big chunky pieces that are going to kind of shingle funny. I'm trying to get a good angle. They'll shingle like this. I want thin pieces that'll lay together in there. And then when this cooks and they soften up and those starches kind of swell and absorb moisture, it's all going to kind of glom together into one thing, and it's going to hold, okay? So that's kind of the idea here. Thin slices, not big chunky ones that are going to make these big shingle effects, okay? All right, so next thing, layer the slices into a buttered dish, pour infused cream over, cover and bake for 400 degrees until the potatoes are tender. How long does that take? I'm going to check these guys in about 20 minutes or so, you know, and just give them a poke with a paring knife, and then I'll make another judgment, okay? In culinary school, students always ask, oh, how long does this take? How long does that take? And the chef instructors universally give them the same answer. It's always however long it takes. We're looking for a desired result here, not a time period, okay? So desired result is tender potatoes. Check them after about 20 minutes, okay, at about 400, okay? If it seems like it needs a lot more, hey, maybe kick your oven up a little bit, because maybe, you know, all ovens are different, right? Maybe your baking pan is different, or what have you. There's so many variables, okay? So with that being said, we're covering and baking till tender, and then we're going to remove that cover, and that's when we are going to brown off the top of this casserole. Cream browns readily, and that's what's going to be browning in there instead of cheese. You're going to see a beautiful color at the end of this thing. You're not going to know there's no cheese in there unless you're like specifically looking for it, right? But it's going to have a really, really big flavor, creaminess. It's all going to be cooked beautifully, and it'll have that beautiful gratin on top. Again, gratin means brown on top. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. I think you guys kind of see all the instructions there. I'm going to bring that on down again. And I'm back. Okay, so let me set up the camera here, do a little scene change, and I'm going to get my potatoes rolling here. Okay, I think I've got everything over here. Okay, so you guys saw all my flavorings going in with the cream and all that good stuff in there and everything. Over here, I've got a pan, and I'm just going to build it in a saute pan, and that gives me a little handle to hang on to and everything in the oven. Another thing I want to point out is I've got a baking sheet over here that it's going to be set on later. When this goes in the oven, it can overflow, so I don't want it overflowing into my oven. So always with the baking sheet, don't forget that thing. Here's my pan. I told you all I'm going to do, that tablespoon of butter, is I'm just going to smear it on in there, okay? So that's just the traditional beginnings of this dish, and it's kind of fun. Bring the family in on that. My pan is not hot at this point. If your pan's hot, that butter melts instantly, and you can't really get that coating of butter on there, okay? So I'm just going to wipe my hands real quick, get that off of there. And let me go ahead and wash out, because I'm still feeling all oily. That's a nice coating of butter in there. Couldn't be happier. All right. And let me give it a little dry here. And we're back. Practically, almost. Just to show you, my cream is still hanging out up there, over there, just picking up tons more flavor, okay? Maybe I'll give that another little swirl just to kind of blend things in the pot. It's doing fine. If I let it steep more than 5 minutes, it's not a problem, as long as I'm not evaporating away. So I've just got a very nice low heat on that thing. It's probably on about 2 out of 10. So there's my pan. I'm going to set that aside. I think I'll set over there. And let me just kind of show you the potatoes that I have so far, okay? So I've cut quite a lot. I'm not going to need very many to put in here. I'll probably do 2 more potatoes, but I want to show you how thin I cut those guys. Now, it's not paper thin, but you can make a thick cut potato chip out of that, okay? How about that, okay? I'm terrible with measurements. Is that a 1/32 of an inch, as long as everybody knows what that is? No, it looks like a thick cut potato chip. Little bit of body to it, you know, it's not totally limp or anything, but it's definitely not going to be chunky in there. Those pieces will shingle together nicely and cook together. And again, that's what's going to hold this whole baby together, okay? And so I don't like that one with his little weird ear. I'm going to break that piece off. I can use a half of one, no problem. Okay, so what I'm using here are russet potatoes, and I'm just going to do a couple of these, okay? I want you to see knife work in every class. And so I am going to... Let's see, I just dropped something. Oh, well. I'm going to go ahead and peel these guys. Now, you guys can go ahead and use a vegetable peeler. I'm very fond of just using a paring knife for this sort of work, okay? So you're going to see me take off the top and the bottom, and then just do long, smooth strokes along the sides, okay? In culinary school, there's a cut that the students hate called a tournée. And they have to do these long, they have to practice these long, smooth strokes like this for it. I'm basically tornading this potato, if you'll look at it that way. There's a few little odd spots in there. I get rid of those. Otherwise, that's a fine looking potato. And I'll do one more, just a little guy, just to show you how I peel. I can kind of zip through a case pretty fast. And if I leave a little peel on there, no big deal. I left peel on most of my potatoes. I like them in there. I feel like I waste food when I'm peeling these potatoes. I like potato skin. Okay, so there's a few peeled potatoes for you. Get rid of that. And I'm going to give these a quick rinse because I was just touching soil and whatnot, right? There's a little dirt on them. And let me just kind of wipe this too. Let's set those guys down. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to bring the knife in here and we are going to start doing our slicing, okay? Now, one thing to show you is, again, we talked about we want very thin slices. One thing to show you, or first thing to show you, let me wipe hands. I'm still kind of wet. I just turned my cream down. So one thing to show you as a reminder, that grip, okay? I'm holding the blade of the knife. See where my fingers are? My fingers are wrapped around the handle just to balance things, okay? But I'm really holding that blade, okay? My second hand is in the claw position. It's parallel to the knife. And I am going to go ahead. I want to show you what happens when I do my first slice here, okay? Notice how it just stuck to the blade there? That's going to be a problem, okay? If I do the next one, and the next one, I could kind of go for a little while, but pretty soon pieces are going to fall off right underneath my blade and I wind up cutting into them. And it starts being a hassle having these things flying all over the place. That one just started doing it, right? And so what I usually do with this is I use the tip of my knife and they're not sticking so badly. My elbow is pointed away from my side on my left hand. And I'm getting these guys as thin as I can with my knife, okay? Culinary students, you know, we want them to do as much knife work as possible. We didn't hand them a mandolin, okay? A mandolin, by the way, I wanted to pull one out. This is the tool that most professional chefs are going to use, something along these lines, okay? I just have a little Chinese one. They have metal ones, European style. But these Chinese ones are pretty ubiquitous out there, very inexpensive, and a great little tool to have around, and it'll give you a nice, consistent slice. But like I said, I want to encourage knife skills. So again, here we go. Using the tip of my blade so it doesn't stick to my knife. It still sticks a little bit. If you have one of those knives that has the dimples in it, those are called cullens with a K. It's a German word. And those cullens break the suction of the vegetables with your knife and they won't stick to your business. So if you have one of those knives with cullens in it, that's a good knife for this job because they are really sticking. And this guy doesn't want to stand up much anymore. I'll get a few more slices out of him. And then I'm just going to turn him on his side and slice him up.